That zombie fell on me, fell on me. What was I doing? Let me use dictation. Actually, nobody ever uses dictation. Software internship, subliminal. Okay, so there isn't a software internship subliminal, but there is a get desired job / paid internship heart emoji subliminal, which might just be enough. What the That goes crazy hard. Inhumane intelligence plus coding genius. Now this sounds more like it. There's an anime style man on the cover of this one with a very with some extremely blue eyes. So let's try this one. Okay, he's like shaking. He's kind of trembling on the screen. This is more frightening than anything. I don't know if this is... Hey! What are you doing there? Get out of here. Sorry about that. It's an apparition on my screen. At the time that I'm filming this, it is August 23rd, 2024, and at this time, almost down to the day last year, I touched back down in the US after spending a summer in South Korea. Lots of fun, lots of friends, lots of public transportation, and legal substances. Oh, well, one legal substance, alcohol. Everything else is not legal. If you are at a 4-year university, you have 3 summers to get an internship, right? The summer after your freshman year, the summer after your sophomore year, and the summer after your junior year. At this time last year, I was going into my junior year, so I was looking at my last possible application window to get an internship before I have to enter the full-time pool with the sharks. The mainstream hiring period for software engineering interns seems to start around mid-August and fizzle out by December. Obviously, you can still get an internship outside of this period. I've seen people do it. Do not give up if you're past this period. But a lot of the main hiring seems to happen during that period. So at this time last year, the game was on. I had no experience seriously applying for internships at all. The last time I had even felt the touch of a LeetCode question was TwoSum back in 2021. So essentially this was my last chance to get an internship, period, and luckily the market was great. The market is always good. I've wanted to make a video about this topic for a while just because I have a lot to say about it, despite the fact that, disclaimer, everything in this video is going to be based on a period of 3 months of my life where I was locked in, from late August to late November when I accepted my final offer. As usual, everything here is from my own experience, specifically 3 months of experience, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt if need be. A lot of these tips are going to be university-centric and based on the specific opportunities that I was able to take advantage of at my university, so might not be generalizable to everyone. Also, I don't want to understate the influence that luck had on getting my results. A lot of the time, I was just in the right place at the right time, or I talked to the right person, or I just happened to go to the right event. One of the things about applications in general, college applications, job applications that can make them so uniquely stressful and frustrating is the fact that at some point you just don't have control over the results that you get. So I'm not here to serve out a step-by-step plan of how you can definitely snag yourself a software engineering internship 100% all the time, but I still hope this video provides you with at least a new perspective or a new insight into this process, and maybe even a feeling of solidarity, because this stuff is not fun. Applying to jobs was kind of like the perfect storm in a lot of ways for me. You know how all these ingredients have to come into play for a storm to form? You know, there's a sense of urgency without a specific deadline, right? There's no deadline for applying to jobs. Well, there is technically, but like there's not one global deadline, right? You can do it or you cannot do it. It's up to you. But you know that every day someone is getting another job. And there's a part of it that is necessarily you have to be self-critical. You have to look at yourself through the eyes of an employer. Networking, going to career fairs, like all these things that could potentially help and that people do during this process just bring me so much anxiety in general. So yeah, You're not alone. I did not just hit you. That was a friendly bro fist. What do you call that? What is this called again? What is that called? Why am I not able to recall this? Yo, give me one of these. A high five, a handshake, or a fist bump. Fist bump. I hope you're proud of me. I really do. Let's talk about the resume. First of all, if you feel self-conscious about your resume, you are not alone. Looking at my resume felt like looking directly at a solar eclipse, except it was less beautiful. But throughout the process, I made a ton of revisions to it, so I had to see it again and again and again, and this made it a lot easier to look at eventually, unlike a solar eclipse. Or maybe just like a solar eclipse. There are a ton of resume resources online. If you go spelunking, you can find pretty much all the help that you need. One interesting resource I used was the Discord server for ACM, the association. ACM is the biggest computing-related student organization at my school, and they have a channel called Resume Roast, where pretty much people crowdsource feedback on their resume. So I just looked through that. I absorbed some of the fun critiques that they were making. The most important points, I would say, are to keep it to one page. Make sure the bullets are concise. Don't put more than 3 bullets per resume item. And try to add some sort of numerical, some sort of quantitative measure of your work. Make sure the formatting is obviously consistent and clean. Also add clickable links to your resumes. If you have a GitHub, a LinkedIn, you can link those. If you have personal projects that you put up somewhere, link them and make them clickable. Some people even link their GitHub repos to their personal projects. Make sure you don't have anything weird in those repositories, buddy. There's no saying that the people who are looking at your resume will actually click on those links, but maybe they will. As for how to actually get started with making your resume and formatting it or whatever, most people just use Word or some form of LaTeX. Word is far, far better at being parsed by ATS, which is like the automatic resume parser thing that some companies use. So I definitely recommend Word if you're going to be mass applying. I wrote mine on Overleaf. So LaTeX, and I don't think that my resume was ATS friendly because whenever I uploaded it to any application that did some sort of resume parsing, which can happen where they try to auto-populate your activities and your skills, etc., it would always fail, and I would have to copy over the contents of my resume again into the application, which was not fun. I had to look up all my skills manually. You know how tough that was, looking through all the different, I typed Java, like the language, and it's just every single concept ever conceived in Java. Oh yeah, I'm a software engineer. One of my special skills is meningitis. That was real. Oh yeah, and cover pages, a footnote for cover pages. I don't really have too much to say about them because you just kind of BS your way through them. I don't know, it's not really important. Some companies that have software positions actually like cover pages. PlayStation likes cover pages. Lockheed Martin likes cover page. Kind of a red flag, if you ask me, but I did have to write a few while I was applying, or I was recommended to. Honestly, just think of some good bullet points and just generate it. Just feed it into ChatGPT. Nobody has time for this stuff. So at the beginning of this process, right, my first question was, what am I gonna do? What exactly is my strategy going into this? This is the hardest part of the process, as most people say, because of the sheer numbers game. A whole bucket load of people are applying, and how in the world do you get picked from that bucket?
That I applied to 1,623 companies.
When I asked people around me how they got their internships, a lot of their responses were that they would just wake up in the morning and fire off 10 applications a day. So just chance maxing in that way. Chance maxing purely based off of RNG. I'm saying a lot of words right now. Basically, I'll call this mass cold applying. It seems like as long as you apply to a certain number of places, you can get responses to a few of them at least. I kept seeing I applied to over 200 companies and I got 2 responses back. That did not make me feel too good about this strategy. But like, yeah, I mean, applying to a lot of places is good because it raises your chances, right? So I tried it. I tried to wake up in the morning and fire off 10 applications a day, and it failed miserably. I think this was just a personal issue because I was just not disciplined enough to do this. I was not disciplined enough to be one of the 200 plus application Reddit folks. Submitting each application did not feel like I was putting my resume in the pile, like putting my name in for consideration. It felt more like I was buying a Powerball ticket. Like, I felt like it was just not gonna work. Like, this is not gonna happen. I'm just doing it to do it. There was a significant lack of hope. That impression was probably overblown, but maybe actually not. I didn't really look at the numbers, I didn't look at the probabilities out there, but also doing each application was unnecessarily tedious. It took me way too long to apply to even a single company because I was constantly thinking about whether I should tailor my resume to the specific job description. Should I do this extra thing? Should I add this extra thing? If they have, God forbid, an optional cover page, do I upload a cover page?
The agenda is very clear. We're going to analyze why I'm a perfectionist. We're going to feel guilty.
And these applications did not make it very easy to just click and one and done them. I know there are extensions for that out there, but I never really got them to work. So a lot of the time I was just manually applying and my resume wouldn't parse, so I would have to copy and paste everything in. And it was just like every application was taking me more than a day to do. So if you're not like me and you do have discipline and you are able to complete these applications pretty quickly, definitely try to apply to as many places as you can because it is good. It is a good thing to do. But however, it was just not my thing. I just knew that it was not sustainable. And although I wanted to apply to as many places as possible, obviously, I did not want to just apply to places. I did not want to just hinge it on my resume will be spotted somehow in this sea of resumes. I wanted more hope. I wanted some Obama. So I decided I had to pivot. I had to find a different way to get an interview.
Charlie Wilder, and I'm a senior mechanical engineering student. As previous experience.
Networking, truly one of the most beautiful words ever stated. One of the advantages of being at a four-year university is that they will try to bring companies on campus for on-campus events where you can actually talk face-to-face with employees and employers. So I decided I was going to try to go to as many of these events as possible for any companies that I was remotely interested in applying to, and just try to talk my way into an interview. For example, there are career fairs, some hosted by the university, some hosted by the School of Engineering at my school or any of the specific departments, and some by student orgs. And there are also individual company events, again, either hosted by the School of Engineering or a specific department, or a specific student org. There was this portal for the School of Engineering at my university that I would constantly check for new events. For UCSD engineering people, it was the Jacobs School portal. I also went on Instagram and Discord and followed all the CS adjacent organizations I could find so I could pick up on any companies coming to campus for student org events. Here is a list of such clubs if that is applicable to you. But yeah, I was going outside, okay? I'm going outside and I'm networking. Wait, okay, hold on. Pause. I don't know if you can tell by the way that I look or the way that I speak, but I am not a very social person. I am trash can at small talk. Small talk is one of my natural enemies, something that I look out for in the wild. All the social skills that I have developed, I have had to build with my own hands. I actually remember telling my dad once, as a young Asian girl, that one day I wanted to be one of those middle-aged white men in the office who could ask another middle-aged white man, "Hey Johnny, how's the wife? How's the kids?"
Hey, Ron.
Hey, Billy.
So the prospect of networking, which if you think about it negatively, is kind of a superficial human interaction, just like small talk. It was not particularly attractive to me. But despite it being such a frightening prospect for me, the reason why I went and did it anyway is because I remembered what it was like to be the one picking people. I had this experience in high school clubs as well as in student organizations in college. And from my experience, I and other people were much more likely to pick people that we knew than people we didn't. Obviously, you can know someone and know that they're not a good fit, so not pick them. This happens. But in general, given one person that you know and one person that you don't, you're more likely to choose the person that you know, even if they're equally qualified. There is a level of currency there. There's a level of social currency. We're human, we're social creatures, so having any sort of connection there socially can be quite powerful. If the job application process was entirely untouched by humans and was just an algorithm, then this would not be a factor. But there are people in this process, which means there are people who can fast track you if they know you. These people are looking at your resume and they don't know anything about you. It's just a stack of strangers with varying levels of shininess to them. But if they see your name in the pile and they recognize it, that could be a huge advantage. At least that was the assumption that I was running with. Even if I wasn't talking to the recruiter or the hiring manager or the person who was doing the actual hiring, just knowing and talking to someone from the company that could mention me to those people felt like a huge plus. And I think it was. Like, if you think about it, this is why networking is even a word, right? This is why referrals are so powerful, because they're coming from someone that they know. I thought about my experiences being hired in the past, not for like a software internship, but for other jobs. For example, I became a CSE tutor because I talked to the professor a lot in office hours. I know a lot of people apply to tutoring. Like, people argue on Reddit about why they didn't get a job as a CSE tutor even though they did like the best in the class and they have such a high GPA. But you really do have to know the professor. That's how you get in. Another example of this was my TA job over the summer at a summer program that I pretty much got because the instructors of that program knew me from a previous summer program I'd been a part of. Like, the way I even found out about that TA position was they had sent out an email to a bunch of us from that previous summer program telling us to apply. I later met someone who had also applied to the same TA position as I had, but they had not been in that previous summer program, who was rejected. So that was like, oh, so they still posted the job opening to the public even though they knew who they were going to hire. And in the end, I think out of the 5 of us, 4 of us were from that previous program, or like knew the instructors through that previous program. So thinking about all the people, including the person that I met who applied to the position, not knowing that they pretty much already knew who they were going to hire, it's like, that's a little bit, Even now, just thinking to my past, thinking about all of the things that I've been chosen for, I have just been coasting off of networking this entire time. Like, even just unconsciously, I have just been coasting off of my social credit. Like, obviously I was qualified for these jobs, right? But I don't think I would have gotten them, or I wouldn't have gotten them as easily if I didn't have these connections to these people who were hiring. So that was why I decided to swallow the pill and go outside. Get out there, open your doors, and touch the blades of grass that lay before you. I don't know. I don't want to do that either. I don't think there's anything less RNG about using this strategy as opposed to just mass applying. This is also entirely up to who you manage to talk to. But I think doing it this way for me felt more productive and it felt more like I had a chance. Okay, but what do you actually talk about? Most of my interactions were just conversations, and I think that was fine as long as it wasn't, like, completely boring. A few of the questions that I asked were, like, how was your journey? How did you get to this company? How did you get to this position? How's your job at the company? What do you do? What do you like about it? You know, these things. It was also a nice plus if I was able to make a small connection with the person, some sort of small similarity that we had. But the most important thing, above all, to remember is at the end of the conversation to get their contact information. Whether that's their LinkedIn, usually, or maybe even their email. Just ask them like, hey, is there any way I can reach you if I have more questions? The contact information was really important, right? Because that gives you a channel to continue speaking to the person. If you want further advice on the application, if you want further insight into the company, or potentially, ideally, a referral, that's the way that you'd be able to ask them, is if you have that channel of communication. Sometimes I would have really cool and interesting conversations with someone and then forget to ask them for their contact information, and then it would be like, oh, I'll just never speak to that person again, I guess. And obviously some people will say yes and some people will say no, but I always try to ask. And then after the event, maybe like a day after or maybe like a week after, if I procrastinated, I would follow up. I would message them or email them and be like, hey, I met you at this event. We talked about this, this, and this. Thank you for your advice in this, etc. And then ask for more advice on applying or maybe even a referral. Also, try not to be afraid to ask for referrals. Everyone has their own standards for like how much they should know someone before being able to give them a referral. But like, remember, like the people who refer you also get a bonus if you end up getting hired. Maybe if you end up being like a totally terrible employee, or you end up like being at the company for 2 months or something, then that would look bad, I suppose. Like if they believe that you are competent and they refer you, they're also getting something out of it. So don't be afraid to bring it up, I guess. Like I think for my company, if you refer an engineer and they end up like staying at the company for longer than maybe 6 months or something, you get like $5,000. That's not no money. That's like some money right there. $5,000, bro? Hit me up for a referral, bro. I'm handing him out like candy on Halloween. Okay, that's not a serious statement. I obviously have my own standards, you know, how much I have to know someone before I refer them. But there's another bit of evidence for why networking is probably good and getting to know people is probably good, because then they can refer you, you know? Like if you know them enough, they can refer you. Hello from the future. One thing I forgot to mention about referrals that I didn't know until after I started applying is that you can't get referrals after you applied to the company, usually. The way that it usually works, or at least from the companies that I've seen, is if you get a referral, you get a special link to actually submit an application to the company. So if you think that there's a chance of you getting a referral to a certain company, then maybe hold off on submitting your application until after you've figured out whether or not that's true. Every company I applied to, I tried to have at least one contact with them. I tried to meet these people through company events, seeing if I knew anyone, like at school, who knew someone who had interned there or are working there. I even like cold message people on LinkedIn, which usually doesn't work, but it actually did work a couple of times, so I won't discount the idea. At the end of the day, I didn't apply to that many companies. I applied to like 30. But I tried to have a point of contact at the company for each one of those applications. The interview for Company A, I got through talking to this guy who was in the MQ like 2 decades ago. If you don't know what the MQ is, it is UCSD's premier satire newspaper student organization. Click on the link to see the funnies. On my weekly troll through the Jacobs School of Engineering portal that I mentioned earlier, I found this individual company event for Company A, and I went to the event and I talked to this guy who was a software engineer at the company. He had not only gone to UCSD, but he had been a part of the MQ while he was there. The MQ is like, it's not a small organization, but it's not huge either, and it was probably even smaller back then. So that was a pretty large coincidence, but it was an excellent way to remember the interaction. So we were talking about, you know, his job, the company, the normal stuff, and I don't know what was in the water that day. I don't know what was in my bloodstream at the time, but I got up the courage to kind of press him a little bit. What I mean by that was I asked him about his work, like what he did, and then I asked him about his team, and then I asked him if his team was hiring an intern. Like, this was a very like pointed question. Like I normally would not ask that kind of thing. But he was like, I don't really know if we're hiring an intern, but I'll talk to my manager about it. So, you know, I asked him for his contact information. I got his LinkedIn and we talked. And while I was applying, like actually submitting the application to the company, we also kept in contact. And then eventually I got the call that I had the interview. And it turns out that that interview was with that guy's manager. So yeah, that conversation with that guy just pretty much directly led me to getting the interview. The interview that I got for Company B, I got through an in-person event actually in the spring before I started applying really hard. So I went on this in-person tour of their company campus, and there I met a bunch of like UCSD alumni who were like, only a couple of years older than me, so it was really nice. I talked to a bunch of them, I got a bunch of their LinkedIns, and when I started applying for real in the fall, I messaged them again and I reconnected with them, and I even met up with some of them in person. And one of them actually ended up referring me to the position and also to a bunch of very helpful resources for the actual interview. I was also in contact with the recruiter who was at that event, and she basically fast-tracked me into getting the recruiter interview and then eventually the actual interview. There were some interesting coincidences there. I was like, there was this one guy that I had randomly talked to in freshman year in the CSE basement who had ended up working for this company and who had like been recruited by the same recruiter that I had seen on that tour. So that was a interesting I didn't know this until I had my recruiter interview. I don't know. There's a lot of the network is crazy, my bro. Yeah, but I got super lucky meeting these incredibly helpful people, and they got me that interview. They really did. I think my stance on networking and like my view of it has changed a lot. Like before, I thought it was incredibly weird to have like a transactional interaction where like you're trying to get a job and this is why I'm talking to this person. It's like such a weird dystopian, like I don't want this to be my interactions kind of thing. And I still kind of feel that way. But the point is like just treating it like any other human interaction where you are like genuinely curious about this person and their company and what they do, and like opening these opportunities for you to work with them in the future. That's totally normal and fine. Like it doesn't have to be a specific, like it doesn't have to be like a different category of interaction where it's like, oh, I am having a genuine human interaction or I am having a networking human interaction. It's like you can do both, I guess. You can just have a normal conversation with someone and then like have them around as a contact for later, and that doesn't have to be like a weird thing. You have a network at the end of the day. You have a bunch of people you can ask about something. Like even maybe they won't remember the interaction that you had like years before, but you at least have a channel where you can reach them, right?
Describe myself. 3 words. Hardworking, alpha male.
I think most people, when they talk about software engineering internship interviews, just split it into behavioral and technical, the binary, but I'm thinking that it's more of a spectrum, that there are more shades of different types of interviews in between these two. And that was part of the reason why it was so tedious to prepare for my interviews. But I'll try to cover most of them, and I'll just split this into, instead of a binary, at least a ternary. Tell me about yourself. What is your greatest strength? What is your greatest weakness? What is your mother's maiden name? Why do you have a second cell phone? Do you have a second cell phone? Why did you refer to a second cell phone while under anesthesia? Tell me about a time that you overcame an insignificant obstacle. Tell me about a time where you had to throw away some of your closely held morals and beliefs. Tell me about a time where you were radicalized by the media. Tell me about a time where you were woke. Tell me about a time where you felt truly and honestly happy. Tell me about a time where you got into a physical altercation with a superior at your company. Tell me about a time where you lost a bet. Tell me about a time where you lost your wife. Tell me about a time where you lost your mind. Tell me about a time where you broke your mother's heart. The behavioral interview is far easier to conquer than the technical, at least in my opinion. Basically, all I did was Google top behavioral interview questions, pull up my resume on the side so I know what I can extract anecdotes from, and go through all the questions and answer them using the STAR method. If you have a lust for life and don't know what STAR means, it stands for situation, task, action, and result. And you can use this to basically answer any behavioral interview question ever. The most important letters in this 4-letter acronym are A and R. I found myself sometimes describing the situation and the task in such detail because I thought that the more technical I got with describing the situation at hand, the more smart I would sound. But that's not what they're looking for. The behavioral questions are meant to gauge how you are at solving problems and how you behave. That's the reason for the questions. Resolving conflicts, the soft skills. So I recommend not falling into the trap of rambling on about the specific bug that you were dealing with or the specific, dependency that wasn't working or something, and instead focus on what you did to solve the problem or to deal with the situation and how that improved the situation. That is all they're looking for. And if you ramble too hard on the other 2 points, they're just going to be sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for you to stop. In general, during the behavioral interview, make sure you always keep the focus on you and what you did and how you're qualified and what skills that you have demonstrated. So while you're answering these questions, try to avoid we and talking about what the team did. It's about you. It's about what you did. It's about how you contributed. So basically, just write answers to all of these questions using the STAR method in some Google document or something you can pull up, maybe even during the interview if that's possible for you, and then just practice them. And come day of, even if they ask you a question that you didn't write down, chances are you can just repurpose an answer for another question. It's not hard to BS a behavioral question, at least not relatively. Just a reminder that everything on your resume is fair game for the interview. I think these questions come somewhere in between the behavioral and technical because they can honestly be either. But I would say to remember that your resume is one of the only pieces of information that they likely have about you, so they will ask you questions based on your resume. So all your projects that you have listed on there, all your experiences, all the skills, the languages and frameworks that you say you know, that's all fair game. They could probably and will probably ask you something about that. So if you put something on there that you haven't seen or heard from in a long time, might be a good idea to do a bit of a refresher. A good strategy is to bring up your resume and bring up the job description of the job that you're interviewing for and look at all the overlaps between those two, and those have the highest chances of being asked about. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the technical interview. God help us all. Am I right? So I started grinding LeetCode after I was confirmed for my technical interview for Company B. Now, Company A, as I'm going to talk about later, did not do LeetCode questions, but Company B did, and was famous on Glassdoor for asking LeetCode easies and LeetCode mediums. So not very high on the LeetCode ladder, but still LeetCode nonetheless. And if you'll remember from before, the last LeetCode question I had even touched was two-sum. So yeah, the last and first LeetCode question I ever touched, I was LeetCode nothing. I was nothing on ranked LeetCode. So here I was maybe a month out from my technical, and now I have to grind out 2,000 LeetCodes in 1 month. It's well known that I'm allergic to the grind. I'm allergic to rapid completion of tasks. So similarly to the way that I refuse to grind out applications, I also refuse to grind out LeetCode problems. Obviously, if you watching have more time and more discipline than I did, which is likely, grinding out LeetCode as often as you can, as many questions as you can get done, is a perfectly good strategy. But I had a month, okay? So I was out of time. I was strapped for time. Not strapped. If you're a LeetCoder, I'm sure you've heard of grokking the coding interview. It basically, if you don't know, it takes all the many LeetCode questions and splits them up into specific patterns, which have specific ways to solve them. This is insanely helpful because now you don't have to study every commonly asked LeetCode question ever, but you can just study these specific patterns and figure out, hey, if I see this pattern, how do I solve it? Basically, I took the most commonly asked grokking patterns. I think they included sliding window, 2 pointers, and maybe binary search, something like that. and studied them and really tried to know them. It was all about recognizing the pattern, remembering the strategy that I should use, and then applying the strategy correctly, and obviously writing good code. And in this process, I did not shy away from looking at solutions. I think if I just went in blind and tried to solve a bunch of questions with no guidance at all, I would just have no idea what I was doing and just waste like hours. I think it's much more effective, especially if you're in a time crunch, to just look at the problem, look at the solution, and try to figure out how they got there. Once I felt I had learned the pattern enough, that was when I actually started solving problems blind. I used neatcode.io a lot, very, very helpful stuff. That guy does amazing stuff. And I also use Grind75, which is like a time flexible list of the most asked LeetCode questions, or the most important LeetCode questions to know how to solve. And as I say, while you're solving a question, practice verbalizing your thought process and talking through your solution. Remember that on the day of, your interviewers are also going to be there as a resource, so do not hesitate to ask them questions. Talking through my thought process and interfacing with my interviewers, I think, earned me a lot of points in my technical interview, which was actually not technically LeetCode. Okay, so let me go over what actually happened in the technical interviews that I had. I'll first talk about Company A. So my technical for Company A was literally one question. So, okay, just to give a bit of background about Company A, right? Company A was not known for asking technical questions. They were known for asking conceptual questions. The year before, I accidentally got an interview for a company that was very similar to Company A. I didn't tell you guys this, and I'm sorry. Let's call this company Company Alpha. So in my sophomore year, I went to one career fair, and I ended up talking to these two nice ladies at the career fair for a while. And it turns out that they were like childhood friends with the manager who was hiring interns at that company, and they talked to that manager. And so I got an interview for Company Alpha. It was very interesting. It was very interesting. I did not expect that to happen. So I had this interview for Company Alpha, and I went in, and I had heard from other people that their company did not ask like LeetCode questions or any technical questions, that it was like almost entirely a behavioral. So I went into the interview with only having prepared for a behavioral interview. And they asked me to define object-oriented programming. What? Okay, maybe that's something that I should know, that I should have known as a sophomore in CS, right? Because I had used object-oriented programming before, right? I knew how to program in an object-oriented way. The first language that they taught in the CS curriculum was either Python or Java. Java is an object-oriented language. So if you learn Java, you have to learn all the object-oriented stuff that comes with it, right? But defining it? Like, someone comes up to you and asks you to define computer science. Like, oh, you're a CS major? Define CS. I was like, it's programming, but there are these things called objects. If I had only studied for this, like, if I had only looked this up on Google before the interview, I could have aced it. But it's like, I just didn't expect this question. I just didn't know I had to prepare for this question. I flubbed it, okay? I flubbed it, and I didn't do good, and Company Alpha rejected my application. I didn't know non-LeetCode technical questions really existed at all. I did not hear about this at all. I didn't know to study for knowledge questions that weren't LeetCode questions. Now here I am a year later applying for Company A, which is very similar to Company Alpha. So I'm thinking maybe I should study these conceptual definitions. And one of the things that Company Alpha mentioned in their interview were the 4 pillars of object-oriented programming. And if you don't know what that is, I don't either. Well, now I do, but then I didn't. And I was talking to the MQ guy, my contact with Company A, and I was like asking like, hey, is it a good idea for me to study these like object-oriented programming concepts? And he was like, yes, definitely do this. Okay, I will do that. So in preparation for my Company A interview, what I did was I locked myself in the basement of the CSE building at my school, and I wrote out a bunch of object-oriented programming concepts on the board and defined them all. I defined object-oriented programming, I defined encapsulation, I defined inheritance, I defined abstraction, and I defined polymorphism. I think I did not go home because I knew that if I went home, I would sleep. So I just tried to sleep in the library, and I hardly slept, and I was curled up on this armchair in the library. It was so uncomfortable and cold. And that's all I remember, my boys. All right, so that's how I prepared for the interview. How did the actual interview go? I pick up the phone because it's a phone interview. It wasn't on Zoom, it was by phone. And it was my prospective manager for Company A. And we talk a little bit. He talks about my GPA for some reason. And the first interview question that he asks me is, what makes a good software engineer? Is this a behavioral question or a technical question? Vote now on your phones. I did not expect this question, okay? I could never have expected this question. This was not something that I studied for. But luckily, I had taken a class called CSE 110, Intro to Software Engineering. And this class was mostly the professor just standing in front of the lecture hall and yapping. Best practices, software longevity, what makes an engineer. We must take the engineer's creed. I take it all back, professor. I owe you my life. I basically just regurgitated what I could remember from those lectures, and it went over great. My prospective manager told me that I would make a good engineer. And that was the first time that I'd ever been told that. But then there was a pause. And then he said in this careful tone, hey, I have to ask this question. I have to ask. And it was apologetic almost. And I knew he was about to bring out the technical. He was about to bring out the technical question. And what question did he ask but, what is polymorphism? What is polymorphism? Let me tell you, man. Not only did I know what polymorphism was, I knew the exact definition, and I had an example for it. I gave a great answer. I gave a great answer because I had rehearsed the question a million times the night before. It just goes to show, interviewers, they're just gonna hit you with the random stuff, and if you prepared for it, you're golden, and if you didn't prepare for it, you better be good at racking your brain. And I'm not very good at racking my brain. For Company A, right? I went to the event around October 14th, sent the guy a message October 23rd, applied and stuff November 1st. Got the call for the interview around November 13th, and then had the interview on November 17th. So that was 4 days to prepare. I had 4 days to prepare, and I think I got the offer maybe the following day, so November 18th. Now we're smoking on that Company B stuff. I would like to apologize for my incorrect use of slang. Company B is alive and well, and I did not mean to disrespect the company I am with. So, like I said, I was angling for a LeetCode Easy or a LeetCode Medium for Company B. But guess what? The Lord smiled down upon me, and I did not get a LeetCode question. It was still a coding question, but it wasn't technically a LeetCode question that exists somewhere. I was basically asked to write a class that functioned the same way as a certain real-world object. Now, I'm not going to tell you specifically what the real-world object was, but it's just a very simple system that exists in the real world. They kind of gave me the skeleton for it, a couple of method headers and the class name, obviously, but I had to be the one to string all the pieces together and write the actual implementation. Keep in mind, the position I was applying for Company B was a position that required knowledge of Java, so I think this is why they chose to do this type of question rather than something more LeetCode-like, because the actual essence of the job was more about knowing how objects work in correlation with each other. I got to choose whatever language I wanted, so I chose Python. Now, hold on. The reason that I chose Python was because I studied LeetCode in Python, because It's easier. There are less things you have to remember. The syntax is simple. This actually ended up being a godsend because my interviewers were not Python people at all. They were not well versed in Python. So at 1 or 2 points during the interview, I tripped up not knowing how to do a specific thing in Python. Like I didn't know how to initialize a specific type of object or something. The interviewers were like, ha ha ha, we don't know either. So what could have been a huge, massive L on my part ended up being more of a bonding moment. I think I would give myself a solid B tier for how I performed in that interview. I did not even finish the actual implementation, but I talked the whole way through and I communicated with the interviewers and I asked clarifying questions and the like. I think it came off as a pretty solid interaction overall, which I think helped make up for the fact that I didn't actually finish the thing. I think I still performed subpar on the technical portion. I didn't get to show that I knew a lot. So what made up more for that deficit was actually the next section of the interview. And yes, there's another section. Believe me when I say I think this is what actually got me the internship for Company B. While I was preparing for the interview for Company B, one of my contacts at Company B got me a Zoom call with one former employee who had worked on a similar team to the one I was interviewing for. And this was their big tip to me. Use the question section. At the end of most interviews, interviewers will ask you if you have any questions for them. This is the one part of the interview where you aren't restricted by what your interviewers are asking you, so you have a lot more freedom there. So you could ask, how's your day-to-day like? But you could also do something else. I was advised to ask questions that demonstrate your specific knowledge, especially technical knowledge, but specific to the company or the team that you're interviewing for or the product that you think you'll be working on. Depending on the questions you ask, this could give you all sorts of different benefits in the interview. Usually your interviewers are going to be engineers or managers for the team that you're working in, and one thing that you can count on these people having a wealth of knowledge on is the specific technical stuff that they're working on. So if you can harvest information about who you're interviewing for, what team you're interviewing for, what product you're going to be working on, and do your research. The more specific, the better. The more that you can appeal to the fact that you have this knowledge and you've done this research. For me, it was getting into contact with someone who knew all that stuff, and if it's public, seeing what the company's doing recently. So when they ask you if you have any questions for them, you can slip a little bit of that insider knowledge in, Do a little reference. Hey, I know your team used to use this thing, but there's been this push to move to this new thing recently. What was the rationale behind that? Is it because of insert morsel of technical knowledge? So I know your team works with this technical concept, so I learned a little bit about that. I'm wondering, how does your team deal with a specific thing within that topic? This way you're also getting them to talk about something that they know, and people love talking about things that they know. So for Company B, I had just done pretty mid and mediocre in the technical, so I was very motivated to demonstrate that I had technical knowledge through the asking of questions. I had a bunch of them prepared, and I asked a few of them, and the interviewers pretty much gave a nice long rant to answer each of them, and I think we even went 15 minutes over, which is good. Like I said, people like talking. People like talking about stuff that they know. I got the offer for Company B later that day while I was proctoring an exam in the CSE basement. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is the fact that there was a conflict. I got my offer for Company A while I had an interview pending for Company B. And Company A had a deadline of you have to confirm or deny that you're going to be doing this internship by the end of 3 or 4 days or something. It was it was a super short deadline. Thank God for my recruiter for Company B, because she fast-tracked that interview and was like, okay, we're going to have to do the interview really soon. So she scheduled that interview before my deadline for Company A. And so I had the interview and then I got the results. So I got the offer later that same day, a couple of hours later. So it was a super fast-tracked process. Who knows, maybe the fact that my interviewers had an extreme deadline to either drop me or keep me contributed to my getting the Company B internship, but that's just imposter syndrome talking. This video is probably too long as it is, so I'm going to keep this short. But yeah, that was my journey. That was my journey with some tips and tricks that I learned along the way. Obviously, some of these things might not work for you. A lot of these things were very specific to my circumstances, but it was still an experience, and it ended up being a successful experience. Thank God. Yeah, it was rough. It was definitely a rough time, but I learned a lot during the way. I reminded myself that there was always respite somewhere, that there were always things I could do and people I could meet, etc., that would take me away and like give me a break from the grind, you know? Because I could have just tried to trap myself in a room and lock myself there and be like, okay, this is the only thing you can do for the next couple of months, but chances are that would have failed pretty quickly and pretty fantastically, and I probably would have just given up and downloaded TikTok or something. The moral of the story is apply pressure. You do have to apply pressure to yourself to get yourself to do things, but be kind. Be kind. It's not life or death. We're not going to die. It's fine. We're all going to be fine. I'm going to end this video here. Like and subscribe. Please hit that subscribe button with a violent grin. Like and subscribe. I hope this was helpful. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Hopefully it will be uploaded within the week. It needs to be. Otherwise it will be uploaded in September, and that's too late. What do you see? I'll see you later. I'll see you later, guys. Bye. Bye-bye.